I call Dr Shane Retty.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to speak to this, the third reading of this bill. And this bill's been topical for a number of reasons, but particularly for its attention on the UV sun tanning component. I think if we look back at Hansard, we'll see that maybe a ratio of 3 to 4 attention's been paid to that part of the bill. But I actually want to echo what one of my colleagues has said regarding the infectious diseases component, because I think this part may have one of its greatest long-term impacts for New Zealanders. And I say that by the manner in which it places chlamydia on the infectious diseases schedule. It'll be a non-notifiable disease included under the Health Act Schedule 1 Part 2 as amended by Clause 10. Now, a 2014 report by the Institute of Environmental Science and Research looking at 2013 DHB data suggested 25,000 positive chlamydia tests. Now, this might seem like a nuisance condition compared to potentially fatal melanoma, but that's 25,000 positive tests which can have significant long-term implications. Pelvic inflammatory disease, ectopic pregnancies, Reiter's syndrome, and in fact, a quarter of all infertility may be due to chlamydia. So it remains my view, actually, that this section of the bill may have more impact on more people than actually the tanning component of the bill, which I want to turn to here, more in reflection of a comment that my colleague across the House made in the Committee of the Whole House. It was kind of interesting. She raised the question as to whether UV nail lamps should be included in the bill and that the UV nail industry had been completely forgotten about. Now, that's kind of interesting because you can certainly get melanomas around the fingernails. Under the fingernails, you call them subungual, and around the fingernails, you call them periungual, and they're actually a problem. They're a problem because they're painless, and people often mistake them for catching their finger in the door or hitting it with a hammer inadvertently because they get that brown stain under the nail like you'd normally do with a bruise. It's a bruise. But in fact, the bruise doesn't go in 3 weeks. It lasts for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, and by the time they realise they've had it that long, often it's actually too late. So I thought this was a really interesting question, whether UV tanning around the nail and in nail tanning clinics actually had any implications. So I wrote to Melanoma New Zealand to seek their advice on that, and they wrote back saying, the risk from nail curing UV lamps is thought to be small, though there is still limited, robust, randomised controlled studies. Currently, we would recommend using sunscreens or UVA protective gloves to limit the risk or avoid drying by this method. So yeah, clearly there may be some increased risk. Mr Speaker, in the overall context, I think this is a very important bill. I appreciate how long it's taken to get to this, the third reading, but I think this bill now lands in a sensible and functional place that will benefit the health of all New Zealanders, and I commend this bill to the House.
I call